My husband said he was severely allergic to peanuts, so why did his breath smell like peanut butter? When I found out my husband Aaron was allergic to peanuts, I was heartbroken. I'd grown up on my grandmother's peanut farm in Georgia, and I loved helping her make peanut butter from scratch in her old kitchen before she passed. Homemade peanut butter became my grief food whenever I missed her. But because of Aaron's allergies, I had no choice. I threw out my entire stash, 6 jars of various brands, plus the last precious jar of grandmother's recipe I'd been rationing. I became that person who read every ingredient label twice, making sure everything was all right for him. But a year into our marriage, I bought a single jar of Jif and hid it in the garage behind paint cans. Whenever Aaron traveled for work, I'd sneak out and eat exactly 1 spoonful. I felt guilty hiding it from him, but he had something to hide from me too. And it was much worse. Aaron and I were watching a movie together on the couch when I caught a whiff of it. That distinct, sweet, nutty smell of peanut from his breath. I stared at him for a while, ready to jump up and call 911 the instant I saw his face turn pink. But it never did. Not even after the movie ended. Honey, is everything all right with you? He raised an eyebrow. Yeah? Why? Well, you smell kinda nutty, I said. His eyes grew wide with panic. Oh, I stopped by my allergist's office on the way home. The new medication they gave had a weird aftertaste. I didn't push it, but something in my gut told me there was more at play. I mean, for months he'd already been weird. Every Saturday he'd go out alone for hours, insisting he was checking special stores for safe products for us to try. And the one time I offered to do it, he wouldn't let me. I don't want you to waste your time on my stupid allergies, he said, kissing my cheek before heading out. But that day he came home with a receipt from his jacket from a restaurant that I knew didn't have a peanut-free menu. When I asked him about it, he admitted to meeting a client there for business, but made sure to only drink water the entire time. My suspicions were confirmed at his mother's 65th birthday dinner last weekend. She'd booked this fancy Thai place downtown, and his aunt ordered these enormous platters of pad Thai for the whole table to share. Aaron, who had been distracted by his phone, grabbed his fork and took a huge bite of the noodles covered in crushed peanuts and satay sauce. I practically launched across the table, yanking my EpiPen from my purse. Aaron! Spit it out! I shouted. Everyone froze. I stared at him, watching him swallow, and realized it was too late. But nothing happened. Aaron kept staring at me, holding the EpiPen like I was insane. Aren't you allergic? I asked. His mother started laughing. Allergic? Aaron used to eat my peanut butter pie every Sunday after church. His sister chimed in that he'd lived on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches through college. Yeah, his dad agreed, just before spilling the tea. He only stopped eating peanuts when he was with that girl, Krista. She's the one who was allergic to everything. Aaron went completely white as I turned to look at him. All those Saturdays he spent outside looking for peanut-free specialty stores, and that restaurant business meeting were all cover-ups for his affair. The car ride home was silent between us. It wasn't until the next morning when I found proof. A text popped up on the screen of Aaron's phone while he was in the shower. Come over. Can't wait for you to divorce her. Moi. From Krista. I sat there for a moment and laughed before calmly pulling out a small bottle of peanut oil from my nightstand. I rubbed it carefully on his phone screen, the inside of his jacket pockets, his wallet, and even his car keys. Just a little gift for Krista. Aaron came out towel drying his hair and said he needed to run to the specialty store. After he left, I went to the garage and pulled out my hidden jar of Jif. I took a huge spoonful right there while I thought, no wonder he didn't choke when I added peanut butter to his drink last week. I sighed. Now I had to find another way. The next morning, I woke up on the couch where I'd fallen asleep after eating that spoonful of peanut butter in the garage. Aaron's phone sat on the coffee table in front of me, screen dark and silent. I picked it up and stared at it, my hands shaking so bad I almost dropped it twice. The text from Krista was still burned into my brain. I needed to figure out what to do next because pretending none of this happened wasn't going to work. I set the phone back down exactly where Aaron had left it, and waited for him to wake up. When he finally came out of the bedroom around 8, I watched him like a hawk. He grabbed his phone off the table and checked it, his fingers touching the screen I'd smeared with peanut oil yesterday. Nothing happened. No red marks, no swelling, no itching. He slipped the phone into his jacket pocket, the same pocket I'd coated with that oil. Still nothing. He pulled out his wallet to check something and touched it all over. My stomach felt weird watching him handle everything I'd contaminated without a single reaction. Part of me had known it wouldn't work because he wasn't actually allergic, but seeing the proof made it real. I followed him around the house that morning, pretending to do normal things while I watched every move he made. He touched his car keys, rubbed his face, ran his hands through his hair. Not one hint of a problem. Around noon, he said he needed to run errands and left. The second his car pulled out of the driveway, I went to our bedroom and opened my nightstand drawer. The small bottle of peanut oil sat there looking innocent, but my hands were shaking again when I picked it up. What had I been thinking? I pulled out my phone and took pictures of the bottle from every angle, making sure the label was clear in each shot. Then I took photos of the drawer, the nightstand, everything around it. I wasn't sure why I was documenting it, but something told me I might need proof later that I'd stopped. I carried the bottle to the back of my closet and shoved it behind a stack of old sweaters where Aaron would never look. My heart was beating fast, and I felt sick thinking about what could have happened if Krista really was as allergic as Aaron claimed. That night, I couldn't sleep. Aaron was snoring next to me, completely relaxed like nothing was wrong. Around 2 in the morning, I carefully reached over and grabbed his phone from his nightstand. I tried our anniversary as the passcode. Wrong. I tried his birthday. Wrong. I tried my birthday, his mom's birthday, every date I could think of. Nothing worked. He'd changed it, probably right after I saw that text from Krista. I put the phone back and stared at the ceiling. I couldn't keep doing this. Sneaking around, trying to catch him, smearing peanut oil on his stuff like some crazy person. I needed to do this the right way, whatever that meant. The next morning after Aaron left for work, I opened my laptop and logged into our joint bank account. I pulled up the credit card statements and started going backwards through the charges. I grabbed a yellow highlighter from the desk drawer and printed out 3 months of statements. Every restaurant charge that I knew wasn't peanut-free got highlighted. The Italian place downtown that puts pine nuts in everything. That steakhouse that serves peanut-crusted salmon. The Thai restaurant where his mom had her birthday dinner. Page after page, the yellow marks piled up, showing a pattern of lies stretching back months. The highlighter bled through the paper in some spots, leaving yellow stains on my desk. I didn't care. I kept going, marking every suspicious charge, every Saturday afternoon when he claimed to be shopping at specialty stores, but the credit card showed regular restaurants instead. By the time I finished, I had a stack of papers covered in yellow marks. I spread them out on the kitchen table and just sat there looking at them. The receipts and statements covered the whole surface. Somewhere in that pile was proof of every lie he'd told me. I thought about my grandmother then, about the peanut farm in Georgia where I'd spent so many weekends as a kid. We'd wake up early on Saturday mornings and she'd teach me how to make peanut butter from scratch in her old kitchen. She'd let me turn the hand crank on the grinder and taste the fresh butter right off the spoon. When she died, that homemade peanut butter became the only thing that made me feel close to her again. And Aaron had made me throw it all away. 6 jars of store-bought peanut butter, plus that last precious jar of grandmother's recipe that I'd been saving. All of it gone into the trash because of his fake allergy. The anger I felt sitting there wasn't just about him cheating. It was about him taking away that connection to her, making me give up something that mattered so much. The next morning, I went to the store and bought a jar of Jif. Not to hide this time. I left it right on the kitchen counter where Aaron would see it when he came down for coffee. I positioned it next to the coffee maker so he couldn't miss it. Then I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop, pretending to work, and waited. He came downstairs around 7:30 and headed straight for the coffee maker like always. He froze when he saw the jar. For maybe 3 seconds, he just stared at it. Then his face smoothed out and he turned to me with this easy smile. He launched into this whole story about how his allergist had recommended exposure therapy. He said he'd been gradually building up his tolerance over the past few months and didn't want to worry me with the details. His voice was so smooth and practiced, like he'd been preparing this explanation for weeks. He even added details about starting with tiny amounts and working his way up. I nodded along and smiled. I asked questions about his treatment plan and offered to help him with it. Inside, I was taking mental notes of every word, every detail of his new lie. If he wanted to keep playing this game, I'd play along. But now I was playing to win. The next morning, I was taking out the trash when our neighbor caught me in the driveway. I mentioned casually that I was worried about Aaron's weekend trips to specialty stores taking so long. She leaned in and told me she'd noticed him leaving around 10 every Saturday morning. He never came back until dinner time, she said, and she'd never seen him carrying any grocery bags when he returned. She asked if everything was okay. I thanked her and said everything was fine, just wondering about his routine. Then I went back inside and added her observations to my notes. That evening when Aaron came home from wherever he'd actually been, I waited until I heard the shower running upstairs. I grabbed my phone and went to the coat closet where he'd hung his jacket. My hands moved through the pockets quickly, fingers searching each one until I felt the folded paper in the inside pocket. I pulled it out and saw it was another restaurant receipt from 2 weeks ago. The date was printed clearly at the top, along with the name of a steakhouse downtown that I knew served peanut sauce on half their menu. I held my phone steady and took 3 photos, making sure the date, time, and total were all visible in the frame. Then I folded the receipt exactly how I'd found it and slipped it back into the same pocket, positioning it in the same spot. The shower was still running upstairs when I went back to the kitchen and transferred the photos to a new folder on my phone labeled Evidence. The next morning, I called a walk-in clinic across town and made an appointment for an STD panel. The receptionist asked if I wanted the full screening, and I said yes, feeling my face get hot even though she couldn't see me through the phone. I drove there during my lunch break and sat in the waiting room filling out forms, checking boxes next to tests I'd never thought I'd need. A nurse called my name and led me back to an exam room where she took my blood pressure and asked routine questions. She didn't make me explain why I needed the tests or look at me with pity when I requested everything. She just nodded and said the results would be ready in a few days. I thanked her and left, driving back to work with my hands gripping the steering wheel tighter than necessary. That night, I tried asking Aaron about his Saturday routine while we ate dinner at the kitchen table. I kept my voice casual and asked if maybe I could come with him next time to help look for the specialty products. He put down his fork and shook his head, saying the stores were really hard to find and spread out all over the city, He said he didn't want me wasting my whole Saturday driving around with him for his stupid allergies. I asked which stores he usually checked, and he gave vague answers about a place near the highway and another one downtown. The conversation went in circles with him deflecting every specific question I asked. I finally dropped it and cleared the dishes, feeling more sure than ever that he was lying about everything. The next morning, I heard the shower start again while I was getting dressed for work. Aaron's phone was sitting on his nightstand where he'd left it charging overnight. I picked it up and saw a new text notification on the lock screen from Krista. The message preview said she was tired of waiting and wanted him to just do it already. I unlocked the screen using his passcode that I still knew and opened the full message. She'd sent 3 texts in a row talking about how she couldn't keep living like this and asking when he was finally going to leave me. I held my phone next to his and took photos of each message, making sure the timestamp and her contact name showed clearly at the top. The shower shut off and I heard him moving around in the bathroom. I put his phone back exactly where it had been and grabbed my purse, heading downstairs before he came out. I looked up divorce attorneys on my phone during my morning break at work. I found one named Mia Harrington, whose office was across town, and whose website said she handled high-conflict divorces. I called the number and told the receptionist I needed a consultation as soon as possible. She asked if Thursday at 2 would work, and I said yes, adding the appointment to my calendar before we hung up. 2 days later, I was sitting in Mia's office on the 3rd floor of a building downtown. The office had gray walls and a big wooden desk covered in file folders. Mia was probably in her 50s with short dark hair and glasses that she adjusted while I talked. I explained everything from the beginning, starting with the fake peanut allergy, and working my way through the restaurant receipts and the birthday dinner at the Thai place. Then I told her about finding Krista's texts and what I'd done with the peanut oil. Mia's expression changed when I mentioned the peanut oil. She leaned forward and asked me to repeat exactly what I'd done. I told her I'd rubbed it on his phone screen, his jacket pockets, his wallet, and his car keys. She was quiet for a moment and then explained that what I'd done could be considered attempted assault, or even poisoning. Her voice was firm when she said I needed to stop any retaliation immediately and focus only on legal documentation. She warned me that Aaron could use my actions against me in divorce proceedings and that I'd given him ammunition to paint me as unstable or dangerous. I felt my stomach twist as I realized how badly I'd messed up. She handed me a tissue box even though I wasn't crying and told me we'd work with what we had, but I needed to promise her I wouldn't do anything like that again. Following Mia's instructions over the next few days, I went through our house room by room with my phone camera. I took photos of every major item we owned, from the furniture in the living room to the appliances in the kitchen. I opened my laptop and started backing up important emails to a secure cloud account that only I could access. I printed out bank statements and credit card bills going back 6 months, organizing them into labeled folders with dates written on the tabs. The financial records filled an entire drawer in my desk. Each time I documented something or filed another paper, I felt a little more in control of the situation. I asked my coworker Coraline if she wanted to grab coffee one afternoon after work. We went to a cafe near our office and sat at a small table by the window. I'd known Coraline for 3 years and trusted her to keep things private. I told her about Aaron's fake allergy and the affair, leaving out the part about the peanut oil because I was too ashamed. She listened without interrupting and didn't look shocked or judgmental. When I finished talking, she reached across the table and squeezed my hand, saying she was available whenever I needed to talk or just wanted company. Having someone outside the situation who knew what I was going through made me feel less alone in the whole mess. I spent hours that night sitting at my desk with my laptop open. I pulled up Krista's social media profiles and started scrolling backwards through her posts from the past few months. She'd checked in at a downtown wine bar 3 different times on Saturday afternoons. I pulled out the credit card statements I'd organized earlier and went through the charges line by line. 3 charges from the same wine bar matched the exact dates of her check-ins. I took screenshots of each post with the timestamp visible and saved them in my evidence folder. Then I cross-referenced 5 more of her location tags with restaurant charges on our credit card. Every single one matched perfectly. I saved all the screenshots in a folder on my desktop and closed my laptop. The next day, I picked up my phone and called Aaron's mother, keeping my voice light and casual when she answered. I told her I was thinking about trying some new recipes and asked if she had any family favorites she could share. She got excited right away and started talking about her peanut butter pie, the one she made every Sunday after church when Aaron was growing up. She laughed and said he used to eat 2 slices at a time and beg her to make extra. I asked a few more questions about ingredients and baking times, writing down everything she said even though I didn't need the recipe. When we hung up, I added a note to my evidence folder about the date and time of the call and what she'd told me about Aaron eating peanut butter his entire childhood. Late that night, I woke up around 2 in the morning and heard Aaron's voice coming from the spare bedroom down the hall. He was talking quietly, almost whispering, and I could tell he was on the phone with someone. I grabbed my phone from the nightstand and opened my notes app, typing in the time and location without getting out of bed. I thought about Mia's warning during our meeting about illegal recording and how anything I did wrong could hurt my case later. I stayed in bed and didn't try to listen closer or record anything, just noted that he was awake and talking to someone at 2 in the morning on a Wednesday. After about 10 minutes, his voice stopped and I heard the spare bedroom door open and close. I pretended to be asleep when he came back to our room. The next morning, I made coffee and sat down at the kitchen table across from Aaron. My hands were shaking under the table, but I kept my voice calm and steady when I told him I knew about Krista. I said the peanut allergy story didn't make sense anymore, and I needed him to be honest with me about what was really going on. I didn't mention the peanut oil or tell him exactly how I'd found out about everything. I just watched his face and waited for him to respond. His face turned bright red and he slammed his coffee mug down on the table. He said I was being paranoid and controlling, that I was making up crazy stories because I couldn't handle him having a normal life outside our marriage. He stood up and grabbed his keys and wallet from the counter, saying he'd leave right now if I kept sabotaging our home with these insane accusations. He held the keys in his hand like he was ready to walk out the door that second just to prove his point. I stayed sitting at the table and didn't say anything else. That evening, he pulled a duffel bag out of the closet and started throwing clothes into it. He said he was going to stay with a friend for a few days to clear his head from my toxic behavior. I stood in the doorway of our bedroom and watched him pack, noting the exact time on my phone when he zipped up the bag and walked past me toward the front door. I followed him to the living room and looked out the window as he threw the bag in his car and backed out of the driveway. The hollow feeling in my chest was mixed with something else, something calmer and more settled than I expected. At work the next day, I sat at my desk staring at my computer screen, barely able to focus on the tasks in front of me. During my lunch break, I went to my manager's office and told her I was dealing with a personal crisis at home. I said I might need some flexibility over the next few weeks, but didn't go into any details about what was happening. She nodded and said to let her know if I needed anything. Then I went back to my desk and tried to get through the rest of the afternoon. That evening, I spread out all the bank statements and receipts across my desk and started organizing everything by date. I printed out the screenshots from Krista's social media and the matching credit card charges, putting each set in a clear plastic sleeve. I bought a 3-ring binder from the store and labeled dividers for different categories like restaurants, Saturdays, and text messages. The act of putting everything in order made me feel less powerless, like I was building something solid instead of just falling apart. By the time I finished, it was almost midnight and the binder was 2 inches thick. Erin's phone buzzed on the coffee table that night with a voicemail notification. I picked it up and saw Krista's name on the screen. I knew I shouldn't listen, but I pressed play anyway. Her voice came through angry and loud, ranting about peanuts and that crazy wife who was trying to ruin everything. She said she knew what I'd done and Erin needed to deal with me before things got worse. I listened to the whole message twice, then saved it to my phone as evidence of their ongoing contact. I added a note in my evidence folder about the date and time the voicemail came in. The next morning, I went to my closet and pulled out the bottle of peanut oil from where I'd hidden it behind my shoes. I carried it to the bathroom and poured the entire thing down the drain, watching the clear liquid disappear. Then I sat down at my desk and wrote out a detailed note documenting exactly what I'd done with the peanut oil and the exact date I'd stopped. The note felt like a confession, but Mia had said accountability was better than trying to hide what I'd done. I put the note in an envelope and filed it in my evidence binder. My anxiety got so bad over the next few days that I made an appointment at an urgent care clinic near my house. I sat in the waiting room for 20 minutes before a doctor called me back. I told her about my stress symptoms, and she asked some questions about what was going on in my life. While she was treating me, she mentioned some basic information about peanut allergies and how anaphylaxis actually works. She explained the symptoms and how fast they happen and what the body goes through during a severe reaction. Listening to her describe the medical facts made me realize how dangerous my actions with the peanut oil had been, even though Erin didn't actually have an allergy. I felt sick sitting there on the exam table, thinking about what could have happened if Krista really did have a severe reaction when she touched his phone or his jacket. The weight of what I'd almost done pressed down on me, and I could barely look the doctor in the eye when she handed me the prescription for my anxiety. The next morning, I woke up early and opened my laptop to check our joint bank account before I even got out of bed. My hands started shaking when I saw the balance drop from yesterday, a withdrawal of $5,000 that Erin made without telling me. I grabbed my phone and called the bank immediately, telling the representative that there was suspicious activity on the account, and I needed to freeze any more large withdrawals until we could investigate. The woman on the phone was professional and asked me a few security questions before putting the freeze in place, and I felt a small bit of relief knowing he couldn't take any more money without my approval. That same afternoon, I drove to a different bank across town and opened a new checking account in only my name, bringing my driver's license and social security card for verification. The bank worker helped me fill out the paperwork and set up online access, and the whole process took less than an hour. As soon as I got back to my car, I called my HR department and requested that they reroute my direct deposit to the new account starting with my next paycheck. The HR person was efficient and didn't ask any questions about why I was changing accounts, just confirmed the routing number and account number twice before updating the system. I felt a small sense of protection knowing that my paycheck wouldn't go into the joint account anymore, and Erin wouldn't have access to my income going forward. That evening, I walked through our house with a notebook and pen, making a detailed list of every item that had belonged to my grandmother. I wrote down her old ceramic mixing bowls that sat on the kitchen shelf, the wooden spoon she used for stirring peanut butter, and the framed black and white photos from the peanut farm that hung in the hallway. I took photos of each item with my phone, making sure to capture the location, and any identifying marks or details that proved they were hers. The process took over 2 hours because I kept finding more things tucked away in closets and cabinets. small treasures I'd almost forgotten about. I added each item to my evidence binder with a note about where it came from and why it mattered to me, determined not to lose these pieces of her in the divorce. Later that night, I sat on the couch scrolling through Krista's social media again, noticing that several of her posts mentioned her workplace and tagged other people who seemed to work at the same company as Aaron. I pulled up Aaron's company website and considered calling his employer to report the affair, thinking maybe it would cause problems for him if they knew he was involved with a coworker. But after thinking it through for almost an hour, I decided against it, because escalating things to his workplace could make me look mean and hurt my own case in the divorce. I closed the browser and made a note in my phone to ask Mia if reporting workplace affairs was ever a good strategy, or if it would just backfire on me. The next day, I started packing some clothes and toiletries to stay at Coraline's house for a few nights, needing space from the house and all the memories it held. While I was pulling items from the closet, I found Aaron's gym bag shoved in the back corner and unzipped it to make sure there was nothing of mine inside. Tucked in the front pocket, I found a spare set of keys on a plain metal ring and an extra phone charger that definitely wasn't for his regular phone. I pulled out my phone and photographed both items exactly where I found them in the bag, then added the photos to my evidence folder with a note that they might be for Krista's apartment. I zipped the bag back up and put it exactly where I'd found it, not wanting Aaron to know I'd been looking through his things. At my next meeting with Mia a few days later, she spent almost an hour teaching me about something called chain of custody and how to properly document evidence so it couldn't be challenged later in court. She explained that I needed to photograph everything in place before moving it, note the exact date and time I found each item, and store all the evidence in a secure location where no one else could access it. I took careful notes in my phone as she talked, feeling more prepared and less like a victim with each practical step I learned. Mia also told me to stop looking through Aaron's belongings without permission, because that could be used against me, and I agreed, even though part of me wanted to keep digging for more proof. When I got home that evening, I sent Aaron a text message offering to try mediation to keep things civil between us and avoid a long court battle. I kept the message simple and calm, saying I thought we could work out a fair division of assets if we both approached it reasonably. He responded within 10 minutes by accusing me of setting him up and refusing to negotiate with someone who tried to poison him. His hostile response actually made me feel better about my case, because it showed he wasn't willing to be reasonable, and I immediately forwarded the entire text thread to Mia so she could see his attitude. Following Mia's guidance over the next week, I filled out all the paperwork to file for legal separation and brought it to her office for review. She made a few small changes to the wording and then explained that we'd have the papers served to Aaron through a professional process server, so there was official documentation of when he received them. When I signed the documents at the bottom, my hand was steady, even though my heart felt like it was breaking at the finality of seeing my signature on legal separation papers. The process server delivered the papers to Aaron at work 2 days later, and Mia called to confirm that he'd been officially served. Aaron called me the very next day, and his voice was angry and loud through the phone, threatening to report me to the police for attempted poisoning with the peanut oil incident. My stomach dropped with fear as I listened to him describe how he could press criminal charges and have me arrested for what I did. I ended the call as quickly as possible and immediately contacted Mia, who told me not to panic because we'd already documented my actions and the fact that I stopped. She said she'd prepare a response strategy and reminded me that being honest about my mistake was better than trying to hide it or deny what happened. That same day, I sat down at my desk and wrote out a careful statement admitting to the one time I put peanut oil on Aaron's belongings. I explained in the statement that I did it in a moment of anger after discovering his affair, that I realized immediately how dangerous and wrong it was, and that I stopped and took no further action of any kind. I wrote about pouring the remaining oil down the drain and documenting the date I stopped, making sure to take full responsibility for my reckless behavior. Mia reviewed every single word of the statement before I signed it, making small edits to the language to make sure I was owning my mistake without making things worse for myself legally. A few days later, my phone rang while I was making lunch, and Mia's name flashed on the screen. She told me to come to her office right away because Detective Watts wanted to talk to me about Aaron's complaint. My stomach twisted as I drove across town, gripping the steering wheel so tight my knuckles went white. Mia met me in the lobby and walked me back to her office where she had already set up her phone on speaker mode. The detective's voice was calm and businesslike when he introduced himself and explained that Aaron had filed a formal complaint about the peanut oil incident. I answered every single question he asked, with Mia sitting right beside me nodding when I looked at her for support. I told him exactly what I did, why I did it, and most importantly when I stopped and poured the rest of the oil down the drain. Detective Watts asked if I had any proof that I stopped, and I mentioned the photos I took of the bottle and the written statement with dates. He thanked me for my cooperation and said he'd be in touch if he needed anything else, then ended the call. Mia squeezed my hand and said I did great. That being honest was the best thing I could have done. That evening around 7 o'clock, Aaron's mother called my cell phone. Her voice sounded tired and sad, caught somewhere between wanting to support her son and feeling concerned about what was happening to me. I kept my answers short and polite, thanking her for calling but explaining that I needed to keep some distance right now for my own health. She understood, or at least she said she did, and we ended the call after just a few minutes. The next morning, I sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop and started building a detailed timeline document. I wrote down every story his mother had told me about his childhood love for her peanut butter pie after church on Sundays. I added his sister's comments about him living on peanut butter and jelly sandwiches through his college years. I included the exact date of the Thai restaurant birthday dinner, and described how he ate pad thai covered in crushed peanuts without any reaction at all. The timeline showed clearly that his supposed peanut allergy only appeared when he started dating someone who actually had the allergy. I printed the document and added it to my evidence binder with the bank statements and receipts, feeling like I was building something solid and real. 2 days later, a thick envelope arrived by certified mail requiring my signature. Inside was a letter from Aaron's attorney accusing me of harassment, attempted harm, and dangerous behavior. The letter threatened criminal charges if I didn't agree to give Aaron most of our shared assets and accept full responsibility for the marriage ending. I read it twice, feeling my hands shake with anger instead of fear. This was exactly the kind of move I should have expected from him, trying to scare me into giving up what was fair. I took photos of every page with my phone and immediately forwarded them to Mia with a message saying we needed to talk. She called me back within an hour and told me not to worry, that threatening letters like this were common tactics to pressure people into bad settlements. Over the next week, Mia worked on drafting our counter-proposal. She sent me the draft to review and I read through it carefully, noting how she offered mutual no contact, fair division of all assets, and included our detailed timeline of Aaron's lies and financial misconduct. The letter was firm but reasonable, not angry or emotional, just stating facts and proposing a fair solution. I approved it and told Mia to send it, feeling proud that I was standing up for myself the right way instead of doing something reckless. That same afternoon, I was scrolling through my phone during a break at work when I saw that Krista had posted something vague on her social media. The post was about crazy exes and finally being free to live her truth, with a bunch of heart emojis. My first reaction was to comment something harsh or share the post with my own caption exposing what she really was. Instead, I took a screenshot with the timestamp clearly visible and saved it to my evidence folder. I closed the app and put my phone away, refusing to give her the satisfaction of knowing she got to me. That night, I sat on my couch with my journal open on my lap and wrote down a promise to myself. I committed to stopping any thoughts of revenge or retaliation and focusing only on getting out of this marriage safely with what was fair. I wrote that my grandmother would want me to be better than my worst impulses, to take the high road even when it felt impossible. The words looked simple on the page, but writing them down made them feel more real and binding. A few days before the scheduled mediation session, I met with Mia at her office to go over everything one more time. We reviewed my 3 main priorities, which were personal safety, fair financial division, and keeping all of my grandmother's belongings. Mia had me practice how I would respond if Aaron brought up the peanut oil incident or tried to make me look unstable or dangerous. We went through different scenarios until I felt prepared instead of scared, until I could answer his likely accusations without getting defensive or emotional. The mediation session itself took place in a conference room at a neutral office building downtown. Joel Manning, the mediator, sat at the head of the table with Aaron and his attorney on one side, and me and Mia on the other. Aaron started talking almost immediately, bringing up the peanut oil incident as proof of my dangerous instability and claiming I had tried to poison him. His voice was loud and confident, like he thought this one mistake would win him everything. Mia stayed completely calm and pulled out our timeline showing his lifelong peanut consumption, the financial records of his secret spending, and written statements from his own family members about his fake allergy. I watched Aaron's face change as Mia methodically presented each piece of evidence, his confident expression cracking into something that looked almost like panic. His attorney tried to redirect the conversation, but Mia kept bringing it back to the facts, to the pattern of lies and deception that had nothing to do with my one reckless act. By the end of the 3-hour session, Joel had established a temporary mutual no-contact order that would prevent either of us from contacting the other directly. He also created a detailed schedule for when each of us could access the house to get our belongings, making sure we would never be there at the same time. The structure felt like relief washing over me, knowing I wouldn't have to face Aaron unexpectedly or deal with more surprise confrontations in the place that used to be our home. Over the next few days, Mia sent me draft after draft of the division proposal, each version getting more detailed as we hammered out every piece of property and every dollar. Aaron wanted the condo equity since his name was on the original mortgage, and I agreed because I didn't want to stay in that place anyway. I kept the car, my grandmother's old mixing bowls, the framed photos from the peanut farm, and her recipe box that I'd stored in the attic. The furniture got split down the middle, with him taking the bedroom set and me taking the living room couch and kitchen table. It wasn't perfect, and I knew I was probably giving up more than I should, but every time I looked at the numbers, I just felt tired instead of angry. Fair enough was all I could manage right now, and I signed off on the terms knowing I could finally move forward. Coraline helped me find a short-term sublet apartment across town, a tiny one-bedroom place with old carpet and a kitchen barely big enough for one person. I moved in on a Saturday morning with just 2 suitcases and a box of grandmother's things, standing in the empty living room and feeling the quiet press against my ears. The first few days, I built a simple routine of waking up, going to work, coming home, and sitting on the secondhand couch I'd bought off Facebook Marketplace. I had therapy appointments twice a week where I talked through the divorce and my guilt about the peanut oil, and I spent my evenings eating takeout and watching cooking shows on my laptop. The loneliness hit me hard most nights, making my chest feel hollow and my apartment feel too big despite being so small. But underneath the loneliness was something else, something that felt like peace, and I held on to that feeling whenever the empty rooms got too loud. At work, I stopped checking my phone every 5 minutes and actually focused on my projects for the first time in months. I finished a big presentation for a client meeting, staying late 3 nights in a row to get the slides perfect and rehearse my talking points. My manager pulled me aside afterward and told me she'd noticed the improvement in my work, that the presentation had been exactly what the client needed. The compliment felt small but important, like a reminder that I was still good at something even if my marriage had fallen apart. I started volunteering for new assignments and joining team meetings instead of staying quiet, and each small professional win helped me remember that I was more than just a wife getting divorced. Coraline came over the following Saturday to help me pack my remaining items from the house during Aaron's scheduled absence. We worked through each room with careful efficiency, boxing up my clothes, books, kitchen items, and the last few pieces of furniture that were mine. She took photos of every box with her phone, and I wrote detailed descriptions on my inventory list, making sure we had proof of exactly what I took. Her jokes about Aaron's terrible taste in throw pillows and her running commentary about how much lighter I seemed kept me from crying as I walked through the rooms one last time. Standing in the doorway before we left, I looked back at the kitchen where I'd cooked so many meals and the living room where we'd watched movies together, saying goodbye to the home I thought I'd have forever. Alone in my new apartment that night, I pulled out a notebook and started writing a letter I knew I'd never send. I wrote about the peanut oil incident, acknowledging how dangerous and wrong it had been, how I'd let my anger turn me into someone I didn't recognize. I wrote about the person I wanted to be instead, someone who handled pain without trying to cause more pain, someone my grandmother would be proud of. The words came slowly at first, but then faster, filling page after page until my hand cramped and my eyes burned. When I finished, I folded the letter carefully, sealed it in an envelope, and put it in the back of my desk drawer. The writing felt like releasing something heavy I'd been carrying, and I slept better that night than I had in weeks. Coraline stopped by a few days later with coffee, and mentioned casually that she'd heard through a mutual friend that Aaron and Krista were having problems. Apparently, Krista didn't trust him after finding out about all his lies, and they'd been fighting about whether he was really done with me. I felt a quick flash of vindication hearing that, a small satisfied feeling that they were making each other miserable. But mostly I just felt exhausted by the whole thing, tired of thinking about them and what they were doing. I told Coraline I didn't want to hear updates about them anymore, that I needed to focus on my own life instead of tracking theirs. She nodded and changed the subject, and I felt lighter knowing I'd drawn that boundary. I had a follow-up appointment with my doctor the next week, a general checkup that turned into a conversation about allergies and food safety. The doctor explained how anaphylaxis works, what happens when someone with a real peanut allergy gets exposed, and how quickly things can go wrong. She didn't know about the peanut oil incident specifically, but her explanations made me understand even more clearly how dangerous my actions had been, how easily I could have seriously hurt Krista, even though she wasn't the one I was trying to hurt. I left the appointment feeling grounded in reality again, more committed than ever to never crossing that line again no matter how angry or hurt I felt. Mia called me a week later to say the court had scheduled our divorce hearing for 3 months out. I stared at my calendar and counted the weeks, realizing this process was going to take much longer than I'd hoped. Part of me wanted it to be over immediately, to wake up one morning and have everything finalized and behind me. But another part of me accepted the timeline with tired resignation, understanding that healing didn't happen quickly, and legal processes moved at their own slow pace. I marked the date in my calendar and told Mia I'd be ready whenever the time came. That same night, I joined an online support group for people leaving difficult relationships, scrolling through posts from strangers who were going through divorces and breakups of their own. Reading their stories made me feel less alone, less crazy for all the confused and angry feelings I'd been having. I posted my own story anonymously, leaving out identifying details but sharing the basics about the fake allergy and the affair, and my own mistakes. The responses came in slowly over the next few days, other members telling me they understood, that I wasn't alone, that getting out was the right choice even when it hurt. The supportive words from strangers reminded me that my feelings were normal, that I wasn't broken for feeling hurt and confused about everything that had happened. Mia called again 2 weeks later with news that Aaron had agreed to sign a preliminary settlement addendum. She emailed me the document and I read through it carefully, checking every clause and every dollar amount against our previous negotiations. Some terms favored him, like keeping a larger share of our savings account, and some terms favored me, like getting to keep all of my grandmother's belongings without any dispute. It wasn't everything I'd wanted, and I knew I was compromising on things that mattered, but it was fair enough that I could accept it and move on. I signed the document and sent it back to Mia, feeling one step closer to being free of this whole mess. Back in my apartment that evening, I pulled out my phone and opened Aaron's contact information. My finger hovered over the block button for just a second before I pressed it, watching his name disappear from my messages and call list. I went through every social media app next, blocking his accounts one by one, feeling lighter with each tap. I sent Mia a quick email letting her know that all future communication with Aaron needed to go through her office only. No exceptions. The quiet that followed felt different from the lonely silence I'd been living in, more like peace than emptiness. I could breathe without waiting for another angry text or manipulative call, and that simple freedom told me I'd made the right choice. A few nights later, I sat down at my small kitchen table with my laptop and started typing. I wrote out everything that had happened, from the fake peanut allergy to the affair to my own terrible mistake with the peanut oil. I left out real names and changed identifying details, but I wrote the truth about how betrayed I felt and how badly I'd wanted revenge. The words came slowly at first, then faster as I let myself remember and process each moment. Reading back through what I'd written helped me see the whole situation more clearly, like I was looking at someone else's story instead of my own. I saved the document and closed my laptop, making a promise to myself that I was done focusing on Aaron and Krista and what they'd done. From now on, I needed to focus on my own healing, on becoming the person I wanted to be instead of the person his lies had almost turned me into. The next morning, I drove to the grocery store and walked straight to the peanut butter aisle. I picked up a jar of my favorite brand, the same kind my grandmother used to keep in her pantry, and carried it to the checkout without hiding it or feeling guilty. Back in my apartment, I twisted off the lid and dipped a spoon directly into the jar, eating a huge spoonful right there standing in my kitchen. The taste brought back Saturday mornings on the farm, helping grandmother measure and mix and jar the peanut butter we'd made from scratch. I could almost smell the peanuts roasting and hear her humming while she worked. The divorce wasn't over, and I still had months of legal mess ahead of me, but standing there in my own space eating peanut butter without anyone watching or judging felt like reclaiming a piece of myself that Aaron's lies had tried to steal. That's today's story wrapped up. Thanks for being here. It really does make these moments feel special. I hope you're leaving with a little more warmth in your day. Subscribe if you'd like to come back for more.